she stood up, she felt a strange sensation between her legs. She looked down and saw that she had wet the couch. Her mother was sitting nearby and saw the whole thing. "Sarah, what's wrong with you?" she exclaimed, her voice loud and shocked. "You are leaking water all over the couch. What have you done?" Sarah was mortified. She had never felt so ashamed in her life. She tried to explain, but her mother wouldn't listen. "You are so clumsy. You are so careless. How could you do this?" her mother shouted, her words piercing Sarah's heart like a knife.
I see you, my heart, baby. A lady of all man's dreams. You be the one where they make me, they put all the hard
Hey
work.
guys, have you ever felt so broken that your body began to betray you? When emotional pain and trauma take over, it can manifest in unexpected ways. For Sarah, it meant her vagina started leaking water, a constant and humiliating reminder of the suffering she endured at the hands of someone she trusted. Join me as I share Sarah's heart-wrenching story, a journey of pain, trauma, and ultimately hope. Let's explore the unseen effects of emotional suffering and the power of resilience. Returning subscribers, hello and thank you so much. See my video for the first time. Please stay tuned by subscribing to the channel. Now, let's get to the story. Sarah's parents, John and Mary, had been married for 2 wonderful years. They had decided to enjoy their marriage before starting a family, so they traveled together, had fun together, and explored new places. But after 2 years, they felt ready to start a family. They tried for 3 years, but nothing happened. They were worried and decided to seek medical help. The doctor ran several tests, but everything seemed normal. "You are both fertile," the doctor said. "I don't understand why you are not getting pregnant." Mary and John were confused and frustrated. They prayed every day, asking God to bless them with a child. One day, Mary met her neighbor, Linda. Linda was a kind and caring person who always had a smile on her face. Mary confided in Linda about their struggles with getting pregnant. Linda listened carefully and then said, "Mary, I think I can help. My spiritual guardian, Reverend James, is a powerful man of God. He has helped many people with similar problems. I'm sure he can help you too." Mary was desperate, so she agreed to meet Reverend James. Linda took her and John to see him. Reverend James was a kind and gentle man with a warm smile. He listened to their story and then said, "Don't worry, my children. I will pray for you and God will answer our prayers. You will conceive and have a beautiful baby." Reverend James gave them some prayers to say and instructed them to fast for 3 days. Mary and John did as they were told, praying and fasting with all their heart. After the 3 days, Reverend James called them to his office and said, "I have good news for you. God has answered our prayers. You, Mary, will conceive and have your baby." Mary was overjoyed. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She hugged Reverend James and thanked him profusely. John was equally happy, and they both left the office with big smiles on their faces. A few months later, Mary realized she was pregnant for the first time in her life. She couldn't believe it. She took a pregnancy test and it was positive. She was so happy that she cried tears of joy. She ran to John and said, "John, I'm pregnant. We are going to have a baby." John was overjoyed. He hugged her tightly, tears of joy streaming down his face. "We are finally going to be parents," he exclaimed. "This reverend must be a true man of God. He made it happen for us." Mary smiled, her eyes shining with happiness. "I know, I can't believe it. We've been waiting for so long, and now our dream is finally coming through. I can't wait to hold our baby in my arms," John said, his voice filled with emotions. "Me neither," Mary replied. "I've already started thinking about what we'll name her. I like Sarah. It means God's gift in Hebrew. That's perfect, John said. Sarah it is then. After 9 months of pregnancy, Mary gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. They named her Sarah, and she was indeed a gift from God. As soon as Sarah was born, John and Mary couldn't stop staring at her. They were both overwhelmed with love and gratitude. Reverend James was right, John said, his voice filled with awe. God did answer our prayers. We have to take Sarah to meet him, Mary said. He needs to see the miracle he prayed for. A few weeks later, John and Mary took Sarah to meet Reverend James. The Reverend's eyes lit up when he saw the baby. Ah, Sarah, you are indeed a blessing from God, he said, holding her in his arms. I'm so glad I could play a part in your journey to parenthood. John and Mary smiled, feeling grateful and blessed. We can't thank you enough, Reverend, John said. You are truly a man of God. Reverend James smiled humbly. It was all God's work, my children. I was just a vessel for his blessing. John and Mary knew they would always be grateful to Reverend James for his prayer and guidance. They knew that Sarah was a miracle, and they would always cherish her as a gift from God. Sarah's parents were overjoyed to have her in their lives. They dedicated her to God and raised her in a loving and devout Christian home. They encouraged her to study the Bible and participate in church activities, hoping she would grow in her faith. Sarah, my dear, always remember that God loves you and wants the best for you, her mother would say. Yes, mommy, I know, Sarah would reply, her eyes shining with innocence. As Sarah grew older, her parents enrolled her in Sunday school, where she met her new Sunday school teacher, Mr. Johnson. At first, he seemed kind and caring, always smiling and willing to help. Hello, Sarah. I'm so glad you are in my class. We are going to learn so much about God's love, Mr. Johnson would say. But soon, Mr. Johnson began to manipulate and blackmail Sarah, using his desires to manipulate Sarah on what God wants her to do. Sarah, if you don't do what I say, God will be disappointed in you, he would whisper, his eyes gleaming with malice. Sarah was confused and scared. She didn't know what to do. Mr. Johnson defied her countless times, leaving her feeling ashamed and guilt. He wants her never to say a word to her parents, so God don't get angry with her and strike her down. Sarah has been raised with, do not speak ill of the man of God. She was raised to believe that men of God are holy, so she couldn't speak anything about these things happening to her. Mommy, I don't feel well, Sarah would say, trying to hide the truth for the fear of God striking her down. What's wrong, sweetie? You can't tell me anything, her mother would ask, concern etched on her face. But Sarah couldn't bring herself to tell them what was happening. She felt too ashamed, too guilty, and never wanted to speak ill of the man of God. As time went on, Sarah's body began to react to the trauma. She started leaking water from her vagina, uncontrollably and inexplicably. One day, Sarah was watching TV in the living room when she got up to the kitchen, but as she stood up, she felt a strange sensation between her legs. She looked down and saw that she had wet the couch. Her mother was sitting nearby and saw the whole thing. Sarah, what's wrong with you? She exclaimed, her voice loud and shocked. You are leaking water all over the couch. What have you done? Sarah was mortified. She had never felt so ashamed in her life. She tried to explain, but her mother wouldn't listen. You are so clumsy. You are so careless. How could you do this? Her mother shouted, her words piercing Sarah's heart like a knife. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. As she ran out of the room, feeling humiliated and alone, she didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to face her mother's anger and disappointment. From that day on, Sarah became withdrawn and quiet, afraid to speak up or ask for help. She felt like she was living with a dark secret, a secret that no one could understand or forgive. And Mr. Johnson continued his manipulation and lies towards her. Her parents thought she was going through puberty phase, but deep down, Sarah was struggling to cope with the trauma and shame that Mr. Johnson had inflicted upon her. The water leaking from her vagina became a constant reminder of her pain and suffering, a pain that she couldn't share with anyone. At school, Sarah's classmates didn't understand what was happening to her. They saw her as different, and they didn't hesitate to make her feel like an outcast. They started calling her Leaky Sarah, a nickname that spread like wildfire through the hallway. "Hey, Leaky Sarah, what's wrong? Can't control your bladder?" One classmate would taunt. "Yeah, Leaky Sarah, you are always making a mess," another would join in. The bullying was relentless, and Sarah felt like she was living in a nightmare. She tried to ignore them, but it was hard to concentrate on her schoolwork when she was constantly being mocked and ridiculed. One day, things got so bad that Sarah broke down in tears in the middle of class. Her teacher, Mrs. Jane, saw what was happening and immediately stepped in. "Okay, class, that's enough," Mrs. Jane said firmly. "We are going to have a talk with the principal about this." The principal, Mr. Smith, called Sarah into his office and listened as she poured out her story, but couldn't bring herself to tell her the whole truth. He was kind and understanding, and he promised to put an end to it. "Sarah, you are not alone," Mr. Smith said. "We are going to get you some help, and we are going to make sure those kids leave you alone. You don't deserve to be treated like this." Principal Smith called Sarah's parents to the school, her voice urgent. "We need to talk about Sarah's situation. She's been leaking constantly, and it's clear she's struggling with something." When they arrived, Mary and John were worried. "What's going on with our daughter?" Mary asked, her eyes scanning Sarah's face. Sarah remained silent, her head bowed in shame. She was too scared to speak up, too afraid of Mr. Johnson's threat. Principal Smith hesitated. "I think we need to consider the possibility of sexual abuse. Sarah's behavior suggests she's been through something traumatic." Mary's eyes widened in denial. "No, never. Not under our watch. Sarah is only interested in church and God, not boys or men." But Principal Smith's words stuck in her head like a nagging feeling. She couldn't shake off the thought that something was terribly wrong. They decided to take Sarah to hospital for further investigation. At the hospital, Dr. Lee examined Sarah and confirmed their worst fear. "Sarah has been defiled multiple times," she said, her voice soft but firm. "She has urinary incontinence, a condition that makes her unable to control her urine." Mary fainted, her body crumbling to the floor. When she woke up, she was still in disbelief. "How could this happen to my child?" she cried, her voice broken. "We are supposed to protect her, not let her be hurt like this." John's face was grim. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Mary. We'll make sure whoever did this pays." Sarah finally opened up to Dr. Lee, revealing the truth about Mr. Johnson's abuse. When her mother heard the culprit's name, she fainted again, her body shaking with rage and grief. "How could he do this to my child?" Mary cried, her voice echoing through the hospital room. "How could he hurt my baby so badly?" John held Sarah close, his eyes filled with tears. "We are so sorry, Sarah. We should have protected you better. We will make sure he pays for what he's done." Dr. Lee's face was sympathetic. "Sarah, you are safe now. We will help you heal, and we will make sure you get the support you need." But Sarah just sobbed, her body shaking with the weight of her secrets. She was finally free from the burden of her silence, but the road to healing would be long and hard. Sarah's parents took her to a therapist, Dr. Rachel, who specialized in trauma and abuse. At first, Sarah was hesitant to open up, but Dr. Rachel's kind and gentle manner put her at ease. "Sarah, I'm here to listen and support you. Dr. Rachel said, you are safe now, and I want to help you heal. Sarah slowly began to share her story, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Rachel listened attentively, her expression compassionate. I feel so ashamed and guilt, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought it was my fault. Dr. Rachel's response was firm and reassuring. Sarah, what happened to you is not your fault. You were a victim of abuse and is not your shame to carry. The perpetrator is responsible, not you. Over the next few weeks, Sarah continued to see Dr. Rachel, walking through her emotions and experiences. She learned about boundaries, consent, and healthy relationships. Meanwhile, her parents attended counseling session with Dr. Rachel as well, learning how to support Sarah and navigate their own feelings of guilt and anger. We should have protected her better, Mary said, tears in her eyes. Dr. Rachel's response was gentle but firm. You didn't know, Mary. You didn't see the signs, but now you do, and you can support Sarah in her healing journey. John nodded, determination in his eyes. We will do whatever it takes to help our daughter heal. With time, patience, and support, Sarah began to heal. She learned the trust again, to find joy in life, and to forgive herself and others. Thank you, Dr. Rachel, Sarah said, her smile genuine. You helped me find my voice again. Dr. Rachel smiled back, her eyes shining with pride. You are welcome, Sarah. You are a strong and resilient young woman. Remember, healing is possible, and you are living proof of that. As the truth about Mr. Johnson's abuse came to light, the police launched an investigation. Before they could arrest him, Mr. Johnson tried to flee the country. We received a tip that he was trying to escape, the detective said. We were able to apprehend him at the airport just as he was about to board a flight. Mr. Johnson was arrested and charged with multiple counts of child abuse. His trial was a sensational one, with many parents and community members attending to show their support for Sarah and her family. During the trial, Sarah's parents testified about the pain and suffering their daughter had endured. Sarah herself also took the stand, bravely sharing her story with the court. The prosecutor asked her, Sarah, can you tell us what happened when you were alone with Mr. Johnson? Sarah's voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. He would touch me inappropriately and make me feel ashamed. He said it was our little secret. The courtroom was silent, with many eyes fixed on Mr. Johnson's expressionless face. The judge's verdict was swift and decisive. Mr. Johnson, you are found guilty on all counts. You will serve a minimum of 20 years in prison. As Mr. Johnson was led away in handcuffs, the courtroom erupted in a mixture of cheers and tears. Outside the courtroom, Sarah's parents spoke to the press. We want to warn other parents to be vigilant, Mary said. Don't trust anyone completely, even if they seem religious or trustworthy. Always keep an eye on your children and listen to them if they report anything strange or you see anything strange. Teach your children never to worship anyone, man of God or no man of God. Let them know when to speak up and guide them to discover the word of God, not believing words of those who are willing to manipulate them with it. John added, we are just grateful that our daughter is safe, and we hope that her story will help others heal and seek justice. The community came together to support Sarah and her family, and the Sunday school program was revamped to include stricter background checks and supervision. As for Mr. Johnson, he will spend the next 2 decades behind bars, a reminder that justice will always catch up with those who harm the innocent. As we conclude the story of Sarah leaking through her vagina under her parents' watch on someone's account, trust broken and justice was served. But the question remains, how can we entrust our children to religious leaders or any other leader while ensuring their safety and well-being? Thank you so much for watching. I would love to hear your opinion in the comment sections below. Don't forget to share this story with your family and your friends who might need it. Till I see you again in my next story, I still remain Tales by Chika. Goodbye.